The 1960s gave us the Beatles, the British Invasion, Motown, and some of the greatest albums ever made. But buried between the hits you know every word to are songs that were just as strange, just as catchy, and somehow slipped through the cracks of collective memory. Here are 15 weird songs from 1960s music you didn't know. Number 15, The Name Game by Shirley Ellis, 1964.
Shirley, Shirley, bo burly, banana, pineapple, burly, fee, fine, mo-
Shirley Ellis was a New York soul singer who had her moment in the early 1960s and made it count. The Name Game was released in November 1964 and reached number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100, meaning at one point it was one of the 3 most played songs in the entire country, built entirely on a phonetic word game that a child could follow and that adults found impossible to put down. The song worked by taking any name and running it through a specific substitution formula that produced a rhyming verse. The chorus varied depending on whose name you were using. If the name started with a vowel, the results became considerably more chaotic, and the specific collision that could occur with certain names became a source of considerable low-key hilarity among people who worked the formula all the way through.
And then I say bo, add a B, then I say the name.
Ellis had written the song with her manager Lincoln Chase, the same songwriter who had written Jim Dandy for Laverne Baker. She had previously reached the top 10 with The Nitty Gritty in 1963. The Name Game outlasted both of those recordings in public consciousness, resurfacing in 2013 in the television series American Horror Story, Asylum, where Jessica Lange performed it in a psychiatric hospital setting, which gave the song an entirely different quality from anything Ellis had in mind when she recorded it nearly 50 years earlier. Ellis died in March 2005 in Atlanta at the age of 72. The game she put on record is still being played.
The Name Game. Shirley.
Number 14, Little Boxes by Malvina Reynolds, 1962.
Little boxes on the hillside.
Malvina Reynolds was 62 years old when she wrote Little Boxes. She had spent decades as a labor activist and folk singer in the Bay Area, and she wrote the song in 1962 while driving with her husband through Daly City, California, looking out the window at the identical suburban houses built on the hills south of San Francisco, feeling a specific combination of amusement and exasperation at what she was seeing. The song describes those houses, their uniformity, the people who live in them, who have all come from the same background, attended the same kinds of schools, lived the same kinds of lives. It was a piece of social satire dressed as a children's song, with a melody so cheerful that you could be halfway through singing along before you processed what you were actually saying.
Little boxes made of ticky-tacky little boxes.
Pete Seeger recorded a cover version in 1963 that reached the UK singles chart and introduced the song to a much wider audience. Reynolds' original had appeared first, but Seeger's version circulated most widely through the folk revival circuit. Reynolds died in 1978, having written hundreds of songs in a career that never made her famous, but that influenced an enormous number of people in the folk and protest traditions. The song returned to sustained public consciousness in 2005 when it was used as the theme of the Showtime television series Weeds, making exactly the same point about American suburban conformity that Reynolds had made in 1962.
Made of ticky-tacky and they all look just the same.
Number 13, I Want Candy by the Strangeloves, 1965.
She's so fine, baby.
The Strangeloves were not from Australia. They were 3 New York songwriting and production professionals, Bob Feldman, Jerry Goldstein, and Richard Gotterer, who had been working in the industry since the late 1950s and had produced My Boyfriend's Back for the Angels in 1963. By 1965, the British invasion had made it commercially difficult to sell records by American acts, so they invented a persona. They presented themselves as brothers named Miles, Niles, and Giles Strange, sheep farmers from Australia. They manufactured an elaborate backstory about their background and gave interviews in character. I Want Candy was released in 1965 and reached number 11 on the Billboard Hot 100, driven by a Bo Diddley beat that Gotterer deployed with considerable skill. Nobody who bought the record knew they were supporting three New York men who had invented an Australian identity specifically to compete with the British invasion. The deception was eventually exposed, at which point it became the most interesting thing about the group. Gotterer went on to produce Blondie's debut album and work with Iggy Pop. I Want Candy was covered in 1982 by Bow Wow Wow, whose version became the better-known recording to subsequent generations. The original Strangelove's version is the more muscular and more bewildering of the two. Number 12, Winchester Cathedral by the New Vaudeville Band, 1966. The New Vaudeville Band was essentially a studio creation. It was conceived by British songwriter and producer Jeff Stevens, who wrote Winchester Cathedral as a deliberate pastiche of 1920s British dance hall music, the kind played in theaters and ballrooms in the era between the two world wars. Recorded before modern microphone techniques existed, the specific novelty was the megaphone effect applied to the lead vocal, giving it the tinny, filtered quality of a pre-modern recording, as though the track had been pressed in 1925 rather than 1966. In the context of that particular year, psychedelic rock, Motown, folk rock, the musical ferment of a genuinely remarkable cultural moment.
Winchester Cathedral.
A song that sounded like it came from 40 years earlier was genuinely disorienting. It reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in November 1966. It won the Grammy Award for Best Contemporary Rock and Roll. Recording at the 1967 Grammy Awards, which means it beat other 1966 nominees that same year. A fact that has generated passionate debate ever since among people who feel strongly about what that year produced and deserve to be recognized. A touring group assembled under the New Vaudeville Band name played shows for a period, but the original studio concept was largely Stevens working on his own. Number 11, Mellow Yellow by Donovan, 1966.
They call me Mellow Yellow.
Donovan Litch, the Scottish folk singer somewhat awkwardly positioned by the British press as a rival to Bob Dylan, who had responded by developing a gentler and more whimsical sensibility than Dylan's, released Mellow Yellow in autumn 1966 and watched it reach number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. The song moves through a series of images without resolving them into any single coherent meaning. The specific mythology that attached itself to the song and never fully left was the banana skin rumor. In 1966, a story circulated through the counterculture that the inner skin of a banana peel, when dried and smoked, produced a mild psychedelic effect. The story was almost certainly false.
I'm just mad about saffron.
No pharmacological basis for it has ever been established. But it spread rapidly through underground newspapers and word of mouth. Mellow Yellow arrived exactly when the rumor was at its peak. Whether Donovan intended the connection, encouraged it, or simply benefited from fortunate timing has never been definitively established. What is established is that Paul McCartney can be heard whispering harmonies somewhere in the background of the recording, a cameo so brief and so buried in the mix that most listeners have never noticed it. McCartney and Donovan were part of the same social world in London in 1966, and his presence in the studio during the session resulted in the contribution. Number 10, Psychotic Reaction by Count 5, 1966.
Oh, little girl, psychotic reaction.
Count 5 were a garage rock band from San Jose, California, who dressed in Dracula capes for performances and released Psychotic Reaction in the summer of 1966. The song reached number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100 and became one of the defining recordings of the American garage rock movement, a genre happening simultaneously with the British invasion that shared some of its energy while remaining distinctly American in its texture. The group was made up of students from William C. Overfelt High School in San Jose, with an average age of around 17 at the time of recording. The name Count 5 appears to reference both Dracula and the 5 members of the band,
And I feel like this.
which is either an elegant coincidence or a deliberate double meaning that nobody has taken explicit credit for. The song borrowed its central guitar riff from I'm a Man by the Yardbirds, a borrowing that was noticed at the time and has been acknowledged since. The Yardbirds were themselves processing the American blues tradition through their British invasion context, so the lineage of Psychotic Reaction runs from Chicago blues to London to San Jose in a relatively direct line. Count 5 had no comparable follow-up. Psychotic Reaction remains one of the better-known songs in a genre that is better known for being named than for any of its individual recordings.
Get your love, I must stay away.
Number 9, 96 Tears by And the Mysterians, 1966.
Too many teardrops for one heart.
The question mark in the band name was not a graphic device. The lead singer actually went by the name Question Mark, or simply Question Mark, and has maintained that persona for decades with a consistency that raises the question of whether it is still a persona or has simply become the person. His legal name is Rudy Martinez, and he was born in Mexico and raised in Michigan. 96 Tears was recorded in a meeting hall in Saginaw, Michigan on a 4-track recorder. It cost almost nothing to produce. The organ sound at its center came from a Vox Continental,
Way down at me.
the same model the Animals used on House of the Rising Sun, and that became identified with the garage rock sound of the mid-1960s. The song reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in October 1966. The title has been the subject of considerable speculation ever since. Has given various explanations across the decades, none of which have fully satisfied the people asking. The number 96 has no obvious symbolic significance. The tears have no clear narrative referent in the lyric. The song generates more questions the more closely it is examined, which may be entirely deliberate. Number 8, Judy in Disguise, with Glasses, by John Fred and his Playboy Band, 1967. John Fred Gurrier was a Baton Rouge, Louisiana musician who had been recording since the early 1960s without significant commercial success. In 1967, he and his band recorded Judy in Disguise, with Glasses, as a direct parody of the Beatles' Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, which had appeared on Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band earlier that year. The melodic structure and the dreamlike imagery were deliberate echoes of the Beatles' track. The title was a phonetic reworking of the original title's initials. It reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in January 1968, knocking the Beatles' own Hello Goodbye from the top spot. That specific chart outcome, a parody of a Beatles song replacing an actual Beatles song at number 1, is one of the more pleasingly absurd facts in the history of American pop chart arithmetic. Gurrier died in April 2005 of kidney failure at the age of 61. He had spent most of the intervening decades in Louisiana, performing regionally and giving occasional interviews about the song that had defined his national career. He maintained warmth and good humor about the whole thing throughout, which is the appropriate response to having had a number 1 hit by finding the right target at exactly the right moment. Number 7, Green Tambourine by the Lemon Pipers, 1968.
Drop your silver in my tambourine.
The Lemon Pipers were a band from Oxford, Ohio, who had been making psychedelic rock with their own vision before their record label decided bubblegum pop was the commercial direction they should be pursuing. They were signed to Buddha Records, which was in the process of becoming the dominant label in the bubblegum genre, and which had firm ideas about what recordings it wanted from the acts on its roster. Green Tambourine was written by Paul Lika and Shelley Pins, professional songwriters hired by the label rather than by the band. The Lemon Pipers recorded it because they were asked to, and because refusing would have created contract complications.
My green tambourine.
It reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in January 1968, making it one of the most commercially successful things any of the band members had ever been associated with, for a recording they hadn't particularly wanted to make. The song is about a street musician playing a green tambourine, which is either a simple narrative or an allegory depending on how much interpretive generosity you bring to it. The Lemon Pipers continued to record in the bubblegum mode for a period before dissolving. Having a number 1 hit from material you didn't write in a genre you didn't choose is not an experience that most musicians describe with uncomplicated pleasure. Number 6, Simon Says by the 1910 Fruit Gum Company, 1968. The 1910 Fruit Gum Company were in some respects the perfect distillation of the bubblegum pop phenomenon of 1968. The name sounded like something from another era, a company that had been selling fruit-flavored gum since before anyone listening was born. And the music matched. Simple, repetitive, built on the premise that the catchiest hook was the one that required the least investment to follow along with. They were from New Jersey. Their real names were Steve Morkowitz, Mark Gutkowski, Floyd Marcus, Pat Carwin, and Frank Jekyll. Simon Says reached number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 in spring, 1968, one of 4 top 20 hits the group scored that year in a creative run that was impressive precisely because it asked nothing complicated of anyone. The song is based on the children's game of the same name, the game in which a designated leader issues instructions that participants must follow only if prefaced with the phrase, Simon Says. The song extrapolates from this premise with a cheerfulness that requires no apology. Casanets and Katz, the production team behind most of the bubblegum hits of 1968, understood their audience with complete clarity and served them without compromise. Simon Says did exactly what it set out to do and did not overstay its welcome. It was produced by Jerry Casanets and Jeff Katz, who were the primary architects of the bubblegum sound and who produced most of the genre's major recordings. The 1910 Fruit Gum Company had several further hits, including 1, 2, 3 Red Light, and Goody Goody Gumdrops, before the genre lost its commercial footing around 1969 and 1970. The specific peak they hit in 1968 was brief, well-defined, and completely its own thing. Number 5, Yummy 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 by Ohio Express, 1968.
Yummy, 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 I got love in my tummy.
Ohio Express were another creation of the Casanets Katz production machine, which by 1968 was operating at full capacity and producing hits with the efficiency of a manufacturing process. The group's name suggested a connection to Ohio that was largely decorative. The recordings were made in New York with session musicians, and the membership of the touring Ohio Express was fluid enough that different people were performing under the name at different times. Yummy 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 reached number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 in June 1968 and was a top 5 hit in the United Kingdom as well. It was written by Joey Levine and Artie Resnick.
Have you such a sweet thing, good enough to eat thing, and it's just
Levine sang lead on the recording, a specific adenoidal high tenor production that was ideally suited to bubblegum material and that he deployed across multiple Cassinet's Cats productions during this period. The song competes for the title of most straightforwardly titled pop song in American history. It begins at its own hook and maintains that hook for its entire runtime. There is a philosophical argument to be made for this as a form of pop music integrity. The song promises exactly what it delivers and delivers exactly what it promises. But it requires a specific kind of generosity toward the bubblegum tradition to make convincingly.
who love to hold ya, who love to kiss ya.
Number 4, Elusive Butterfly by Bob Lind, 1966.
Out on the new horizon.
Bob Lind was a Denver-born folk singer who had moved to San Francisco in the mid-1960s and released Elusive Butterfly in early 1966. It reached number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100 and was a top 10 hit in the United Kingdom, where it was covered by Val Doonican and became a competing version on British radio simultaneously with Lind's original. The song is entirely unlike anything else on this list. It is a folk pop ballad of genuine lyrical ambition, a meditation on the elusiveness of beauty or love or some quality of experience that can be sensed but never quite caught, using an extended butterfly metaphor pursued through multiple verses without resolution. The production is spare and delicate. Lind's voice has a quality of genuine searching that matches the subject matter in a way that can't be faked.
Don't be concerned, it will not harm you.
The song communicates a specific mood, the mood of someone who has glimpsed something worth chasing and knows that chasing it is the whole point. With remarkable precision, he had no comparable subsequent commercial hit. He continued recording and performing throughout his career, and Elusive Butterfly remained the thing he was known for. The song has appeared on numerous retrospective collections of the period and has been reassessed over the decades as one of the better pieces of songwriting produced by the folk pop tradition of the mid-1960s. Lind himself has been philosophical about the one-hit nature of his commercial profile, noting in various interviews that having one song still in circulation after 60 years is more than most songwriters can claim, which is both generous and entirely accurate.
Elusive butterfly of love.
Number 3, Turn Down Day by The Kirkle, 1966.
It's a turn down day.
The Circle have an unusual place in music history for a group that most people have never heard of. They were managed by Brian Epstein, the same Brian Epstein who managed the Beatles, which in 1966 was about as significant a managerial endorsement as existed in popular music. They were the opening act for the Beatles' final American tour in August 1966. The tour that ended at Candlestick Park in San Francisco on August 29, 1966, after which the Beatles never performed publicly again. Standing in the wings of those shows, opening for the biggest band in the world at the moment of their final goodbye, is not a resume line most musicians ever get to claim. They had 2 top 10 American hits. Red Rubber Ball, released earlier in 1966 and co-written by Paul Simon, reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. Turn Down Day followed later that year, reaching number 16.
I can dream away for love.
The band was from Easton, Pennsylvania, and had been playing together since their college years at Lafayette College. The specific appeal of Turn Down Day is its mood, a song about wanting to stay still, wanting to not participate in whatever the world expects of you, wanting to remain where you are and let ordinary demands pass by for a while. The arrangement is gentle, the production warm, and it works best heard unexpectedly, catching you without defenses on a slow afternoon. The lyric has a specific quality of contented resistance to the pressures of the day that fits some afternoons better than others. Epstein's death in August 1967 was a significant blow to the group, which disbanded the following year. Their 2 years of activity produced recordings that have maintained quiet reputations among people who know the music of that period well. The Circle are not famous. They were on the right stage at the right moment in history, and they left behind a handful of recordings that deserved more attention than they received. Number 2, I Had Too Much to Dream Last Night by the Electric Prunes, 1966. The Electric Prunes were a Los Angeles garage rock band who released I Had Too Much to Dream Last Night in late 1966 on Reprise Records. It reached number 11 on the Billboard Hot 100 in early 1967 and remains one of the most distinctive recordings to emerge from the American garage rock and early psychedelic movement. The song was written by Annette Tucker and Nancy Mance, two female songwriters who provided material for various acts during this period and who had a specific understanding of what the Electric Prunes needed in a song. The fuzz guitar that opens the record has an aggressive texture that was considered fairly extreme for commercial radio in late 1966. It does not ease in gently, it announces its presence and leaves it to the listener to catch up. Lead singer James Lowe has described the recording process as quick and instinctive. The band had a sound they were developing, and the song fit into it with a naturalness that good material tends to have when it finds the right performers. The Electric Prunes continued recording and released a concept album called Mass in F Minor in 1968, a psychedelic interpretation of the Catholic Mass using their sound as backdrop, one of the more genuinely unusual records released in a year, already full of genuinely unusual records. By that point, the original lineup had largely been replaced by session musicians, giving the album an identity that was more the producer's vision than the band's own. I Had Too Much to Dream Last Night appears on virtually every serious retrospective compilation of the period and has maintained its reputation as an essential garage rock recording for nearly 60 years. It is a song that sounds like it belongs exactly where it came from and nowhere else. Number 1, Lightnin' Strikes by Lou Christie, 1966. Lou Christie was born Luigi Alfredo Giovanni Sacco in Glen Willard, Pennsylvania in 1943. He was working with a songwriter named Twyla Herbert, who co-wrote most of his significant material and who remained a consistent creative collaborator throughout his career, when he recorded Lightnin' Strikes in late 1965. It was released in December 1965 and reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in January 1966. The song is built on the tension between a narrator's stated moral convictions and his actual behavior when presented with temptation. He believes in a specific set of values right up until those values become inconvenient, at which point lightning strikes and he is overcome. The structure of the song, moving from earnest declaration to immediate contradiction, has a comic undertow that Christie played entirely straight, which is the correct choice. That falsetto is the central fact of the recording and of everything Lou Christie has ever recorded. He had a falsetto range that very few singers in any genre have ever matched. A high, clean, operatically precise upper register that he could sustain at full volume without any apparent strain, that landed on the ear as something simultaneously unexpected and completely authoritative. The musical influences that fed into his approach included not just rock and roll, but the Italian operatic tradition he had grown up hearing through his family's cultural background, and the combination produced a vocal style that had no real equivalent in American popular music of the period. He was drafted into the United States Army in 1966, which disrupted his commercial momentum at the worst possible moment. He returned from service and continued recording, reaching the top 10 again with I'm Gonna Make You Mine in 1969. The falsetto remained intact throughout. The specific cultural moment that had made Lightnin' Strikes a #1 hit had passed, but the voice itself was not something that time or the Army could diminish. If any of these sent you searching for your old records, hit the like button and subscribe. There are more deep dives like this one waiting